Let me
Well, thank you.
let me show your loveliness right there. And now I'm going to put up your lower third because I love this lower third. Creative roustabout.
Aha.
Can you just take the cake as the best lower third of our season?
It would be my pleasure. I will take the cake and eat it too.
All right. So first of all, I need to explain to the audience that Kathryn and I have known each other for, I don't know, a whole bunch of math years. Like we'd have to do math to
Two
figure it
hands for
out.
sure. Yeah, yeah.
So I'm not even going to say, but I got to know Kathryn as the most passionate and committed activist I had ever come across back in the early 21st century when many of us were trying to avert the Gulf War. Through the 21st century, as many of us were trying to raise an alarm about the climate crisis. So thank you for doing that, Kathryn. And now tell me a little bit about how do you explain yourself to someone new?
Oh my God, where do you start? Um, I think I am first and foremost an artist interested in relevance. And, if I am able to apply whatever gifts and interests and creativity I have in service of something which has meaning and purpose, it almost doesn't matter what it is. And there was a time in my life where I identified solely as an actor. And I was pounding the pavement in New York and doing the thing. And I was like, I'm an actor. I'm only an actor. It is the only thing I will ever be happy at or do, blah, blah, blah. And when I released that and discovered that there was meaning and purpose and joy and intrigue and all the juicy stuff in whatever creative form of creative expression I might engage in, the what didn't really matter anymore. And so I could be teaching or directing or writing or acting or speechifying or whatever it might be. And it was all of the same piece. If it was coming from heart and passion and purpose, then that was good enough.
It is worth noting that so much of what you said and were thinking about in 2002, 2012, and now here we are in 2020, and the amount that the needle has moved is just shockingly and sadly low in the world out there. Yet you persist. And I also, I forgot to mention that you're coming to us from Vermont, which
Yes.
is, one of the homes of climate activism in the world.
Yes.
So, how are things in Vermont?
Things in Vermont are as challenging as they are anywhere else. I would say the upside is that it's still a very small state, and we all still know each other, quite literally. So I am friends with the lieutenant governor, and I know the secretary of state, and I know all my legislators by name, and I know many of the business leaders, and we all know each other. And so I think we are able to maintain a sense of civic responsibility to each other, and at a level that just isn't possible in a larger place. You're in California, you're about a bajillion and a half times bigger than Vermont. And so there's just, you can engage on a community level, but you certainly can't engage in quite the same way on a statewide level. And I think that's a lot of what the folks who've been working in the movement for a long time have been talking about is the unsustainability of systems that are that large. And it's a big piece of what we're seeing, I think, right now with the coronavirus epidemic is that the systems which we like to pretend were sustainable were not. And they have failed us rapidly because they were fundamentally unsustainable. And that the work of relocalizing seems to be one of the most powerful things we can do right now. And that's where I have been very inspired by Bill McKibben and 350.org and Avaz and all the activist groups and Idle No More and all the pipeline water protectors and pipeline preventers. They're extraordinary. There's also the group of people who come from the permaculture world, from the transition town world, who say, look, the reality is we are going to have systemic impact on a large scale. And the best way to build resilience and true sustainability is to relocalize and do things on as small a scale as possible. Not that we don't knit ourselves together and we're not interconnected, because that's a truth of the modern world which we don't want to let go of. But at the same time, we need to be able to deal with each other on a human scale, because the magical tools which have enabled us to expand beyond the human scale are the ones which are the most unsustainable.
Um, I love the fact that you can talk about everything at a kind of a high level, the systems level, the global level, if you will, and at the same time bring it down to the tools, the techniques, the connections we need to make this happen at the local level. Because I think a lot of people, especially nowadays, feel like I can't do anything. I'm just one person sitting here. What am I going to do? And that's something that you've dealt with. I mean, what do you say to people who say, "There's nothing you can do, Kathryn. There's
Oh,
nothing I can do."
yeah, that's so not true, because in the movement you hear an argument: is it systems level change or is it individual change? And it's both. It's all of the choices that we can make as human beings around where we live and how we move around and how we get our food and how we get our clothing and how we get the material uh, substance of our lives. But then there's also local politics. Pete Seeger used to talk about how anytime a group of people are gathered together, that's the body politic. And so you can engage in local politics at a local level that have to do with the sustainability of your local food systems or your local school system or how energy is being produced. Anything that you can be passionate about has a connection to climate and resiliency and sustainability, because it all counts. You're in your local, you're doing community theater in Johnson, Vermont, in the Northeast Kingdom. And the question of what are you going to do with your costumes and your sets once you're done? Is your lighting LED? Is it or is the theater having to pay through the nose for electricity off the grid that comes from burning coal, or is it solar? Everything that you do is connected at some point to all of these larger questions. And if all you do is the research to figure out how to get non-paper source toilet paper and bamboo toothbrushes, and that's what you're given to your family, awesome. If you plant a garden, if you just get some of your summer salad greens, gardening is the ultimate. They talk about, like I work in the weed industry now, actually, and they talk about pot as the gateway drug. Gardening is a total gateway drug also to a whole host of more planet friendly practices. Because when you've grown your own food, it's your baby. You care about it. And giving, food is love, and giving food that you have grown to somebody else is an act of love. And I think guerrilla gardeners like Ron Finley from Oakland have done an incredible job of sharing those kinds of stories of what it does to a community when you start growing food together, much less making, pasta or whatever. But like, here's my kale. These are my children and this is what I have for you to share. It's huge.
It is huge, and it reminds me of something that my wife says all the time. She says the only way that, a certain segment of her parents' generation can show love is through food. Food is love. The food I cook for you, this is the love I give you. So certain things will not change ever, I don't think.
No, it's very true. And honestly, I come from a very non-cooking family, but my grandmother presenting us a Sara Lee pound cake, it was the exact same thing. And and also when the larger systems start to break down, we might not be able to get mangoes from Guatemala or asparagus from Mexico, but I could dig up some dandelion greens from my yard. I could grow you an artichoke. And what we can truly create for ourselves and share with each other is the way that we survive.
I want to ask you about Earth Day because, of course, 2 weeks ago now it was Earth Day, and that's the day when everybody does something or says something that gives a nod to our planet. And I worry that that sort of episodic yearly thing is on some level a little bit of a problem because I want every day to be Earth Day. I want
Yeah.
Earth Day to be around and people to live more mindfully. Um, what do you recommend? Especially, one of the things I want to do is reach out to children, to families in the context of these discussions and say, how do you get engaged with Earth Day, with environmentalism, and not have it just be, oh, I did that yesterday.
Earth Day, we there's a reason why humanity has holidays. We need moments to elevate and celebrate and re-articulate the things that we are most passionate about and renew the covenant of our commitment to the planet or to whatever at any holiday. What we do, whether it's Passover or Christmas or whatever it might be, or Earth Day. And so it's a moment to sort of refresh ourselves and refocus our attention on stuff. Part of the challenge that we run into is we still have all these unsustainable systems, right? So you walk away from Earth Day and you still have to live your life, live the life you're living within the context that you're living in. And when you have highly financed, aggressive, power hungry people who are deeply invested in making sure that your efforts are merely symbolic, that's a hard thing to go up against. And so we need to find ways of getting in there and fighting the dirty, unglamorous fight, but then also popping back out and having a day of celebration, because otherwise it's just a grind. And it's so easy to despair and it's so easy to give up. And that's the last thing we want to do.
Absolutely. What are you looking forward to this year for yourself? Is there anything new or different that you might be doing?
Oh, well, things are pretty uncertain right now. And I personally, I'm not in a classical category of high risk, but so 4 years ago, my appendix exploded and I ended up in the hospital with sepsis and I almost died and it was all very dramatic. And the result of that is they had to do this huge operation to get me cleaned out. They slit me wide open, as James Thurber says in the 13 Clocks, from my guggle to my zatch, and got in there very aggressively to clean things out. And the consequences, it sort of makes me think of back when we had maps and you'd go to the gas station, get a map, and it was all nicely folded. And then you'd unfold it once, and there was no putting it back the way it was. And you'd wad it up and you'd shove it in the glove compartment. That's what it feels like they did to my innards. And so I have a very scrambled and sensitive core. And that's very easily overtaxed. And it can be overtaxed by digging in my garden, or it can be overtaxed by coughing too much. And when it gets overtaxed, that's some weeks of healing. So I would prefer not to get sick because I just don't feel as robust as I used to feel. So I feel incredibly protective of my own well-being. And it's very easy to think about sequestering myself, even though all of my impulses still, and I'm not nearly as out there go-getting as I used to be because I don't have the energetic reserves that I used to. That's one of the consequences of all of this. I get all the activist newsletters, but I don't do all that much. But I still care enormously. And every time I hear about something, my impulse is I want to engage. And I have to curb that impulse for the sake of long-term wellness, which ironically, I feel like is the thing that we all have to do one way or another, both individually and as a society. We have to be very meticulous and conscious and nuanced about the choices that we're making, about what we're going to do, where we're going to spend our time, our money, our energy, what we value, what's true necessity for our lives, and what we can release and let go of and allow to transform, which is where I find the seeds of, I won't call it excitement exactly, but possibility in all of this. Much like Trump's election pulled back the covers on a lot of what was not right that we were lying to ourselves about, I think coronavirus too has pulled back the lid on so many of our collective inequities and injustices. And we're talking about it in ways that we haven't ever talked about it before. And things that had been a couple of months ago cute and theoretical, like universal basic income or universal health care or transforming our systems of higher education, are now almost inevitable because of the impacts. And the conversations around caring for the least among us, around honoring frontline workers who are being paid $8 an hour, about the need for minimum wage, about the need to, the fact that we've put a halt on things like evictions, the fact that communities have housed, for the sake of the health of the entire community, found ways to house their homeless in the short term, means that these are things that we can do in the long term if we decide that we still have a political will. And so I hope that the conversations that we're all having, mostly privately and online, will propagate in a way that truly serve us and transform us in the long run.
Absolutely. What you're talking about reminds me of two things, though. One is the conversation which starts with nobody wants to have a pandemic as the driver for social change. We don't wish that on any society. We wish that the things that we're seeing change, the ways in which the skies are bluer, the homeless are housed, could be seen as not taking advantage of a pandemic, but at least showing us a direction that we can go and choose to have better lives for all of us. But at the same time, there's a faction that says, no, no, no. We can't even think about climate. We can't think about the homeless. We need to think about getting our oil industry back up and running.
Yeah.
And I mean, probably you and I don't have close friends with whom we have that conversation and must distinguish between those important things like life versus, propping up the airline industry or the coal industry or the shale oil industry. But we are seeing that there needs to be some way to have the conversation without feeling like we're taking advantage of the pandemic. Is that part of your thought process nowadays?
I don't really worry about justifying that stuff. And you hear so many people who go through a serious illness express an enormous amount of gratitude for the gifts that illness brought. Not that they would have chosen it or would wish it on anybody else, but that their personal transformation that they've gone through as a result of what their experience has been of immense value. And I would say that is true for me too. I have often felt like I had the best worst thing happen. I lost an organ that I could stand to lose. While it's frustrating to me to get scaled back in my pursuits, it's not like anyone else knows. No one's keeping track. And the whole thing for me was a spiritual initiation that was quite profound. And in healing my body, I've healed many things in my spirit that I did not even know needed healing or could be healed. So similarly, I think we tend not to make change unless we're pushed one way or another. And collective change doesn't happen unless there's a giant collective push. And so I don't know. And the interesting piece about can we deal with climate? We can't deal with climate while we're virus is that a lot of the changes that we need to make around climate are changes that we need to make around coronavirus. And the speed with which we need to make them and the scale is stuff that the powers that be have said for years, no, we can't do that. And we're doing it because we have to, because lives are more immediately and egregiously on the line in our own communities. And I think that's the tricky part about climate change, too, is that the people who are hardest hit can be over there. And I have seen so many shots of Los Angeles on fire and people continuing to just drive down the road. It's like, we'll just get through it. And, there's not enough people. You got to have a sort of a critical mass of people who are threatened directly in order to do something about it. So we could look at the entire continent of Australia being on fire and go, wow, poor koalas. But when we are all of us forced to stay home in order to serve the collective good, that's not a choice that we ever make very often. And so it's an opportunity for us to learn that we can do that, and that there's a humanizing quality around all of that. And I've been really tickled by all the videos that are running around of both, sort of families dancing to ABBA or whatever, because it's the only thing they could do to entertain themselves. And, musicians I've admired for years also stuck at home trying to figure out how to keep their creative juices flowing and give something back to the community. And it's humanizing of us all. And I can only hope that that's a powerful enough catalyst to then transform us a little bit more.
And I believe you speak for many of us when you say that, because, well, you say it much more nicely and articulately, and I appreciate that. Thank you on our behalf. Kathryn Blume, I'm going to say bye for now, and will you come join us again?
Anytime. So happy to.
Thanks, Kathryn.
My pleasure.